So welcome everybody. This is Amy Calvert. I'll be your moderator today. I am the CEO of the Events Industry Council, and it's really a pleasure to be able to be with you in this virtual environment and celebrate Global Meetings Industry Day. While we know it is certainly not, our preference, I think it's an important moment in time for us to come together and pause as an industry in a moment of solidarity, particularly for those most impacted by COVID-19, and to take a moment to reflect about that which we know to be inherently the most important aspects of our industry, and that is community. And that's really what today is all about. It is really a pleasure to be this panel, thought leaders, and an opportunity to discuss, not only what we know to be the reality of the economic impact of COVID-19 on our global community, but really taking a more human-centric approach to lessons in leadership and what it means to be resilient and adaptive, and to think a little bit about what transformation means to our industry as we start to be able to find the time to think about recovery. So, we talk a lot about the scope and scale of the global events industry. We know that it represents over 1.5 trillion in GDP on an annual basis, and we know that we're a community of over 26 million global professionals. And, I think that oftentimes those numbers are lofty, and we like to utilize them in conversation, but at the end of the day, again, I think what's most important is the people. The people on the front lines right now that are facing deep challenges, whether it's furloughs or economic uncertainty. So, I think this panel felt really strongly that the focus for today should be on that which we can do in a really collaborative and united fashion to focus on ways to best support the community from where we stand right now. And so, I'd like to just take a moment to thank them very much for their leadership and for being present through this, not only for the individual companies that they represent, but for the broader global events industry. So Karina Bauer, CEO of IMEX Group, Adam Sachs, President of Tourism Economics, Scott Salambrino, COO and Executive Director of the Global Business Travel Association, Sebastian Tondor, CEO of MCI Group, and then Paul Van Deventer, our CEO of Meetings Professional International, and actually our board chair this year for the Events Industry Council. And, I think the first thing that, we want to sort of come to terms with on this call is that we have faced challenges before as a global events industry. We have samples of setbacks and crises that have impacted regions, but nothing that's really had this global impact, right, and the magnitude of COVID-19. It's really more significant than, anything that we faced in the past. If you look at some of the statistics, the impact to the airline industry, I think they're looking at, a setback of over 50% year over year, which represents over, $500 billion in revenue. And I think that it's hard to sort of get your mind around the significance of that. But I think one of the things that we like to do is we, community, are able to harness the power of an organization like ours and really think about uniting in a way that we haven't previously to, like I said before, tackle this challenge of coming together and being present in what our industry needs most pressing in terms of support and relief efforts, and then start to think in a unified fashion about adaptation and transformation long term. At the Events Industry Council, one of the first things we did was try to come together and put together a repository of resources. We started to think about, how do we offer information around making fact-based decisions as opposed to reacting from a place of fear, and what that responsiveness meant to the industry. And then, we started to think about our response in sort of distinct phases, right? The first phase was really just trying to be present around providing real-time information, really not getting too mired down in the, what is the immediate impact relative to business loss, more around trying to, again, find ways to advocate and ensure that our industry was a part of the relief efforts and advocacy efforts on a global basis, and then starting to think about a coordinated approach to recovery. And resilience really, in my mind, has a lot to do with how we show up for our workforce, how we try to stabilize our businesses. And we are going, as an organization, a global federation, to be comprising 2 business task force groups that looks at this in a really focused and collaborative way. So we'll have one that's really focused on near term. What do we need right now to think about putting together a coalition that can best serve as we start to think about the transition coming out of COVID-19, and then what are the things that we need to be thinking about relative to preparedness for the next crisis. So I'm really excited to be able to work with not only our council, but a lot of great and fantastic industry partners in support of this initiative. So having said all that, I wanted to actually to reach out and ask Adam to maybe talk a little bit about, while we don't know the impact right now, obviously, as we said, and we really don't want to have that be the focus right now, can you tell us a little bit, Adam, about the process that you're going through and working with your teams and the various partners that you work with to sort of assess the impact and maybe using data and using the resources that you have to better articulate a path forward for our industry?
Sure, Amy. And, our team is looking at this really with 2 different lenses. And the first is, what is the effect of this crisis on the economy? And then the other lens is what's going on in terms of travel and the meetings industry. And in both cases, I think an interesting starting point is to look at what happened during the last crisis that our industry faced, which was the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009. And for comparison, global GDP during that, what was considered a generational recession, global GDP fell just 1%, while U.S. GDP fell 2.5%. During that crisis, just as a kind of a measuring stick of what happened to the meetings industry, group room demand in the U.S. fell 15% that year, right? And it took us the better part of 3 years to recover all of that. So when we put the economic lens on what's going on right now, we're actually looking at a situation that's much more severe, with global GDP expected to be down 7% in the first half of this year, 3% for the year overall. Unemployment in the U.S. is likely to touch upwards toward 15%, with 24 million jobs lost in April. So the economy alone suggests a worse outcome for the meetings industry, with a similar recovery period. But the main difference is actually not that, of course. It's the reality that this crisis is clamping down on travel more broadly. And so the initial impacts, of course, are much, much more acute for the meetings industry than we ever experienced during the great financial crisis. So in that sense, the second lens, the first one being the economy, the second lens of travel, I think, is really informative. And, right now, travel spending in the U.S. is down about 85% over the last couple of weeks relative to last year. Globally, international cross-border travel, we think for the year is going to be down 50 to 60% when you average out across all regions of the world. We expect room demand to be down in the U.S. about 50%. That's the latest STR forecast that we produced earlier this month. So what does that mean for group and for events? It likely means that within this initial period of time, and you can think about that kind of the March period through the fall, is that you're looking at a situation for events that's worse than for the overall travel industry. Why is that? It's because the initial recovery that we're expecting for travel is in leisure and then also in regional demand, and that's around the world. And so it's likely that the recovery on the group and the event side is going to lag that. So none of that is particularly good news. But we're also looking at, and I think this is essential as you think about resiliency, which you talked about, Amy, is that the recovery is going to be quite dramatic when it does materialize. There are a number of reasons for that. I mean, one of them is that while the economic damage in the labor market is severe indeed, most of those job losses, and this is similar to what we experienced during the Great Financial Crisis, are actually at the lower end of income earners. And so the impact on travel and events is not going to be as severe as it will be at kind of the budget level of travel, where we're seeing the greatest job losses in terms of income earners. Another reason that we're optimistic in terms of the sharpness of the rebound on the other side of this is it does have to do with the pent-up demand that's being generated right now and the strength of the economic recovery. The amount of money that's being put into the economic engines to basically thrust things forward once things open up is really has never been seen before. I mean, Congress approved in total something short of $2 trillion for the entire Great Financial Crisis. In the CARES Act alone, we've already approved $2 trillion, with more coming. The Fed has already approved $4 trillion in liquidity for the U.S. economy. Similar decisions being made by the ECB and by central banks and governments across Asia and the Middle East. And so that's going to be a powerful thrust to the global economy once things do begin to open up. So I mentioned those horrifying GDP numbers for 2020 to start out. Down 4% for the U.S. this year, down 3% for the global economy. Oxford's predicting a gain of 6% in GDP for the global economy in 2021 and a 7% gain for the U.S. economy in 2021. So that's absolutely going to be wind in the sails of the U.S. economy and is going to be a major factor once things begin to open up for meetings. It's going to be gradual, though, right? It's very likely that the opening up is going to be incremental. It's going to be regional, and so so we're going to need to be patient, and that patience is, I think we're going to begin to see demand pick up and opportunities begin to materialize as we get through the summer and particularly into the fall, but it's going to be tempered with the real opportunity materializing in 2021 as those restrictions lift and as the economy continues to repair. So that's a lot there for an opening remark, Amy, but to sum that up, things are pretty bad right now, and I think that we need to be at least comfortable with that reality for some number of months.
That's a good way to put it, right?
Yeah. But prepare for what's likely to be a sharp rebound.
All of us are sort of struggling with that, right? How do we get comfortable with what we know to be, like you said, just losses of magnitudes that we just have not seen before, and yet still have a resilient mindset and prepare and think about this as an opportunity potentially to redefine the value proposition of our industry, and that which is, I think, also an opportunity to evolve, and think differently about, how we tell our story through data. And, you and I have talked about this a little bit, Adam, but, is this a time for us? And I'd love your thoughts to think about not only the real direct and the indirect impacts that we quantify now, but a little bit deeper thinking and collaboration around the catalytic impact of events on the global community, and how do we once and for all sort of come together and have a united effort around better telling the story through that lens. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I think that's going to be essential once things begin to open up and we get into the rebuild phase of this crisis. And to be sure, that is an inevitable phase. I mean, it's hard to see it through the fog right now, but there is an inevitable phase of rebuilding and recovery that is in front of us. We don't know exactly when it is, but it is inevitable. And I think that there we can take some of the cues from what the events industry did successfully after the Great Financial Crisis, when many of you will remember there was a lot of negative press and antipathy toward the meetings industry, but also you had the economic carnage of the Great Financial Crisis as companies were trying to, limit their spending on all but essential expenses. But some of the messages that came out there, I think, were critical then and are critical now. One of them was that Oxford did some research Amy, you'll remember, I think it was in 2013, where we looked at companies that had continued to invest in meetings during the recession and how they performed relative to those businesses that cut back. And what we found was that consistently, those companies that continued to invest through the downturn in participation in events outperformed those that cut back. And so that I think that case study is something we want to continue to push in terms of the narrative, as we, because part of the recovery is going to be, continuing to convince businesses of the value proposition of events, and I think that's going to be part of it. Of course, there's the whole body of research that the Events Industry Council has been involved in, with showing the benefits of events in terms of networking and industry knowledge, sales generations, staff development. All those categories are as critical to highlight now as they've ever been.
Yeah, well, it's so true, right? This notion that the investment in events is an investment in human capital, right, and creates inspiration and connection and community. Well, we need to continue to think about that, and to think about how we as an organization and as an industry really help the professionals that are faced with, the impact of this crisis, sort of make this transition successfully, and we'll talk more about that. Scott, I want to turn to you a little bit, because I know you've actually been living this journey yourself on behalf of GBTA and having to make some tough decisions. And, as Adam noted, the events industry typically will follow that of corporate travel recovery and a leisure recovery. Eric, can you share some thoughts about how you've been thinking and feeling, not only about, your organization, but the people that you represent? I know you've been in close contact with all of your members on what probably feels like a daily basis, trying to find ways to come together and harness the power of your network.
So obviously in our world, we're dealing with people who are ultimately the decision makers as to when they're going to allow people to continue to travel at all. And those decisions were taken away from the travel departments and are now sitting with the risk management people and the legal people. And that's a new dynamic that didn't happen in the financial crisis. It's all about safety and liability. And everybody is trying to mitigate any potential liability for their employees. So if nobody is allowing people to travel in the month of May, there's not going to be anybody having a meeting because they're not allowed to go anywhere. And so we're working with many of the C-suite players to say, hey, what is going to be your baseline? Is it going to be the CDC? Is it going to be the government? Is it going to be the state you're operating in? But we're trying to help them to refocus on when and how they will start to give people the opportunity to travel. And that's becoming a pretty big focal point for us, because we know it's not going to happen without their approval, because they're not going to allow people to do it. And when you have the lawyers making the decisions with the risk management people, it's not an exciting crowd. They have a very different black and white view of everything in the world. And they seem to be, for the time being, the people that are influencing the decisions in the C-suite, because we're talking to the C-suite regularly. Here's the other piece of this problem. As I talk to the airline people, as I talk to the hotel people on a daily basis, in an interview I did with the New York Times, it's coming out tomorrow, the media always has this obsession with, when's it all going to be okay? When is travel going to be back? And I look at them and say, look, we're not scientists. We have no idea when it's going to be back. It's a science issue. It's not a government issue. It's a science issue. What I'm being told, what I've told them is that it's very easy to shut things down. It took 30 days. The entire world of travel is shut. Every airline grounded. Every hotel started to close. And you see the thousands of hotels that have closed and the thousands of airplanes that are now parked in the desert or on remote airstrips. It's going to take a long time to turn the system back on. The president of Southwest, who I just did a podcast with 2 days ago, said, Scott, people aren't understanding. When you take a plane and you put it away, you have to take things apart, and then you have to put it all back together again, and then you have to get the crews on schedule, and you have to determine if there's any demand, because the supply is not coming back until the demand is there. So there is this issue of how do you then manage that demand? How do you get demand to work? That's a problem for everybody, folks. The hotels are not just going to flip a switch and say we're going to have every Marriott open tomorrow. That is not going to happen with the industry. So everybody has to be patient, as Adam said, because it's going to take a long time to get back to some semblance of normalcy. What we're trying to do with the vendor side of our business, which is the hotels, the airlines, the transportation people, the agency people, is to say, how do you help us to talk to the client base about what you need them to be showing you from a demand perspective to help them help you to put scheduling back on, to put city pairs back in the system, and to open hotels that might be the first places where you're going to see this type of demand need in each market. Is it going to be London, New York, LA, and Chicago? Or is it going to be, you know, Berlin and Houston and Dallas? But it's certainly not going to be the secondary tier markets in the beginning, because that's not where the airlines' focus is going to be. And they've said that to us clearly. Now, the government might have something to say about that, because the government's trying to put restrictions on the airlines on how and when and how this is going to look for them. So everybody's being serviced technically. Don't buy that, because I'm not sure they have the capability of actually delivering it. So we're trying to come up with educational opportunities to show everybody in the entire supply chain, this is what it's going to take to get back to some semblance of normalcy. And we're trying to understand what that model looks like as we speak. But it's what we're talking about every day now. We're beyond the numbers. The numbers are at zero. Every survey, we do a 10-day rolling survey that goes to the government. Every senator, every congressman gets a copy of the survey. It goes to Brussels. Our survey, we survey 1,100 corporations every 10 days. It's the most up-to-date data points in the travel sector, and every 10 days it comes out, it is finally zeroed out. We're at zero. It can't get any worse. There's nothing left for it to go to. So from now on, all we're focusing on is how do we get our membership to look at recovery? What does recovery look like? What are the factors that it's going to take in the market in order for corporations to open up the ability to travel, to allow them to travel? And then what's it going to take for the industry, the airlines, the ground people, the hotel people, the meetings people, I mean, go down the list of the chain to catch up with that recovery, because it's not going to be instantaneous. And it's a big, big, big project. And that's where our focus is how do we get people to focus on recovery now? And what does recovery look like, which is another part of the problem.
I mean, I think that we're all sort of grappling with that, right? And I think the best thing that we can do is just be honest with ourselves. There is no model and there is no plan right now. We have to really, I think this is where, you know, your stakeholder group is an important ally with the events industry stakeholder groups, so that we are aligned around our messaging. I mean, if you think about what happened in the very early weeks of COVID-19, it was the corporate risk management folks and the lawyers that really put kind of a hard stop on travel and supporting events. So how do we harness that same network and that power to be our advocates as we start to think about not just the corporate traveler, but the event?
Well, nobody wants to be the Biogen, which is a great Boston company, which is where I'm from, who had the problem where there was 92 people that went to that meeting in the waterfront of Boston who became immediately infected, and they basically then from there, the state of Massachusetts became a disaster area. Now, we're not blaming Biogen. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
What I'm saying is nobody wants that headline attached to them. So companies are going to think long and hard before they say it's all clear for big corporates to travel, because nobody wants that. It's a big, big lingering problem, and I feel bad for Biogen, because they're a great organization and a company that's trying to solve the problem of the actual virus. It's what they do. They're in biotech. But boy, nobody needs that headline. And that's what people are worried about on the risk management side, is they don't want to be that person.
Yeah. Well, I think that you bring up some really fair points. I'd like to, if we can, turn it to you, Sebastian, to maybe offer some perspective. You're in a unique position where you have leadership based in regions around the globe that are experiencing this somewhat differently based on their geographies. But at the end of the day, we are, like I said, a global industry, and we're focused first and foremost on showing up with empathy and compassion and trying to be part of the solution. Do you have any thoughts that you think would be really important to share with this group right now around how do we all collectively the appropriate mindset to deal with what's in front of us in the near term and then as we think about recovery.
Yes, hello everyone. Hi Amy. And so, you know, we have seen since January 15 being based in China, the wave just, you know, wash out all our companies that were shutting down one after the other, you know, kind of going west. And it was quite frightening, you know, for to see that wave, because every basically 3 days I had a new office being impacted, cancellations, you know, and it was a constant flow. And what was very clear is what, you know, we were really first in terms of the problems, and what is likely today we're seeing is will be, you know, like it was just discussed, you know, I don't know if we'll be the last out, but probably. However, what was very different this time than, for example, 2008, was that the industry, let's call it lobby, the organizations representing us were way better organized to be in contact with governments and get support and recognition for the importance of our industry. So that's a battle I think we've won in the past 10, 15 years, which is really, really important. An example is last night there was the French president that was speaking, and he clearly referenced the event industry. I think that's a huge difference to a few years ago. Now, if I come down to, you know, the agency world, and, you know, we work with our customers on programs, we really saw 3 waves. So the first wave was one of survival. So the clients were calling, okay, I need to survive. Perhaps the event is critical to their lead generation, to their engagement with their channel partners. We need to, or maybe as a revenue for an association or an association conference. So it was about survival. So, you know, we found quick fixes. Then from this initial phase of quick fixes came the experimentation. A couple of our clients thought, oh, okay, I'm not going to do a live event. Doing it online is really easy. I'm just going to do a webinar, pick a technology. And what they realize is this is actually a real business. You don't just pull out and create an online event just like that. So this actually gave us an opportunity to win some new clients, you know, interesting enough. Although, you know, we were doing about 20 events per day, and now we're doing maybe 1, you know, online event per week. So it's really not the same volume, and we're far from, you know, being in a safe space. And now what we're seeing about, you know, 1.5 months to 2 months in most countries is we're getting the first, I call it structured briefs, so proper briefs where we need to, you know, transform, replace, or transform or augment, you know, a live event that cannot take place, but at least in a structured way, you know, and we're going to do proper strategic planning sessions and so on. And, you know, then there's a last part, if, you know, talking recovery, resilience, we're seeing, I mean, we still have Q4 of this year where we have real live events still, you know, at play, confirmed. We're still confirming events with our customers for Q4 this year, but it's definitely much more local audiences and local events. So that doesn't have international travel component. That's been really canceled, even going far into next year already. But in that conversation with our clients, how far it goes, there's a clear commitment that face-to-face is essential to them. So that says, you know, a little bit of feeling good. And, you know, with that in mind, I think the lessons are what? And I think the main lessons in all of this that we can see are 2 things. The first thing is that there's a big difference between innovation and transformation. The industry is not going to all go online. It's really going to stay. There's going to be innovation, but until it's anchored, it's going to take many years, okay? From innovation to transformation, it takes time, you know, no panic. We have time to learn, and I think we have a credibility as an event industry to be also the online event industry. Then what was very clear is that, you know, no real events, no real content, no real audiences. So I see when I go on social media, look at content, TV shows everywhere, companies marketing. When there's not an event in the future or an area where content is created, there's clearly no content for activation. Look at the sports section, nothing is going on in there. So I think we can be really hopeful for the future. I think that's the bottom line. Definitely 10% of our jobs will disappear and 100% of our jobs will be different, as IBM CEO says. I think that's a good summary of what we're seeing today, but a long way until the back to normal I was said before. I lost sound.
Amy, you're muted.
I'm muted. See, this is my moderating skills hard at work. So the point that you raised is that was, I think, a really good one, is that virtual events are not meant to be a replacement for live events. They never could be, right? Because it's so impossible to create those moments of serendipity that happen only when you're actually in the presence of a colleague, right? And capturing and using it to build and to make investments in science and research and all the things we know that meetings prop up and support. I guess I have a question for you, and maybe it's a two-part question around advocacy on behalf of our global industry. You know, I think we've done a great job advocating regionally, but I think there's an opportunity here for us perhaps to work in a more aligned fashion around that. I think, you know, for so long now, we've known internally within our industry that the small medium enterprise businesses are sort of the lifeblood and the heart and soul of what we do. And we rely on them to deliver the experiences right across the globe. And yet they seem to not be in a high enough profile when you think about advocacy, because those are the ones that we need to be available to us when we come out of this, right? And we think about recovery. Any thoughts about just collaboration there and how we better tell that story?
Of course. So, you know, this is a very complex, you know, I chaired MPI working with Paul a few years ago, and we discussed this many times, or, you know, I was working with Didier, that's now with Sight. And this is a very complex issue. First, there is language. And here with the advocacy, you talking, you know, really detailed individual links with politicians at very short notice. So this is like a legal environment we're dealing with. So I think it's extremely complex. So it's noble to say, let's try to gather all of that together, but you're talking 200 countries in the world and with, you know, different languages, different legal systems. So it's really not easy. You know, I think it would be good, and actually, you know, EIC is the platform to gather everybody under, and it would be great to create those connections. I don't think it's that hard to create at least the connection, you know, email all those different associations, just say, send us your press releases. Even if it's a different language, you can translate it. At least you know what's going on. It's what I've asked to some associations, you know, in countries where I'm at. I emailed the president of those associations. I said, just email me whatever you're sending out to politics, because it helps me rebound and can activate my teams globally, because it's so important to hear a voice. And that, you know, we're not represented only by, you know, the great travel associations or the hotel industry that have, you know, a huge power and reach. Our industry, you know, has to be heard. And I think it was heard. Again, like I said yesterday, you know, the president of France, and I've heard other country presidents, you know, referencing specifically the event industry as an industry that they have to protect because it's required so there's some good out of this bad.
Thank you. Yeah, really well said. Great points. So Karina, thank you for being patient. Turn my attention to you, one of our industry's greatest champions, and your generosity and the commitment that you've made to building community through your IMEX programs has just been fantastic. So I guess my question, you know, you've been listening to the panelists today. I guess maybe you can share a little bit about your own personal experiences in working through this journey as a leader, leading a team through some tough decisions, and the things that, you know, are really concerning you and you think are important for us to keep top of mind as we start to think about how do we show up right now in the best possible way to support the industry dealing with just, like I said, unprecedented setbacks and loss, and how do we have the right mind and start to think about coming together again.
Yeah, thank you, Amy, and it's really interesting as well to listen to the other panelists and their insights. I think obviously, you know, as an organizer, and there are probably a lot of organizers listening in right now, I think one of the things that we've tried to do, and that is very important for us to do, is to be, in order for us all to be ready for that rebuild and that recovery, you know, we need to do everything we can to support the ecosystem which makes up the business events industry around the world. So I think step one is to not just think about ourselves and our businesses, even though that's very difficult when you're going through crisis and when you're really in survival mode. But really, if we look forward, we need to be really focused on protecting our suppliers, protecting the contractors, so that we're ready to take advantage of that rebuild and that recovery. I think as well, you know, looking forward and looking at what transformation might look like for organisers in this period where you're looking at survival and also keeping connected to your communities, is really focusing on what your business objectives are and what you offer to the world, if you like. So a lot of people are going online, and of course that's all that we have open to us right now. I think it's really important to deliver an online event or experience that is unique to you, and not just a Me Too event. You know, there are a lot of webinars. I'm sure we're all getting invited to webinars on a sort of minute-by-minute basis, and there's amazing content out there, but it's hard to keep up. So I think that's something really important, you know, to keep in mind. I think when we look forward, you know, it's impossible for us to know what the industry is going to be like. And I think what Scott said is so important. You know, there is a time lag, and it's important for us to get our heads around that and to be accepting of that as well, because that is going to happen whether we like it or not. I do think that once we get through that, though, once people feel safe in traveling again, and once people feel safe to meet and be in a big event together again, I think there will be a lot of pent-up demand. As Scott said, as Seb said, and also as Adam said, you know, the meetings and events industry and the live events industry is an inherently good business sense. You know, at the end of the day, that hasn't changed. You know, the ability for us to meet has changed right now, but at the end of the day, the need for people to come together hasn't changed, and the recognition that businesses have built up over the past 10 years of how valuable it has been to deliver their brand values, or motivate a team, innovate better together, bring scientists together to develop research and indeed vaccines. None of those things have changed. So the fundamentals of our business are the same. So really it's about, as Adam said, being patient so that we can activate again. I do think, though, the lessons we're learning now around how our events can be extended in a virtual arena, how we can deliver more hybrid events, what we can really do to supplement our businesses online. These things aren't new. They've been there for the past 10, 15 years. We just haven't needed them in the same way. And I think the lessons we're learning now are really important, and hopefully will stand us all in better stead into that future, and hopefully get us through the next however many months it's going to be, but also put us on a better platform for the future as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, you lead a great team. Any thoughts you want to share about how you stay engaged with them and keep connected with them in this virtual environment, and help them manage their own fears and struggles with so much uncertainty?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. A lot of businesses are quite remote already. Ours was not. So we have a team of 65 people, and we're largely all based in one office on the south coast of the UK. So for us, going remote was really difficult, actually. But it's been a good experience. You know, we've again learned a lot about how to keep engaged. We're doing a lot of engagement activities. We had an engagement program that we were already running, and we flipped that to virtual almost instantly. So everything from, you know, virtual happy hours with themes, to sending letterbox flowers to people, to implementing a buddy system as well, to make sure that people are calling each other for chats rather than just sort of functional work things, looking out for people who we know are, living at home, and so are very much alone at this point in time. So we've sort of put in place a whole raft of different, what we would call engagement activities, to make sure that our team are still connected. And in this period, we've had to collaborate really strongly together to try to as well create a new virtual experience that we've never done before. And as Seb said, it's not as easy as clicking your fingers. There's so much to learn, and our team have had to collaborate in that different way. So it's been a massive learning experience, but I think at the end of the day, I think what we've learned is that the work we've done to build a strong team in the past sort of 10, 20 years comes to fruition now. When you go through crisis, when you go through an event that you haven't been planning for, you can actually flip quickly if the strong team and those sort of fundamentals are in place.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I was on our earlier session on mindfulness and wellness, and then again on a CMP peer-to-peer call earlier today. And in both those hours, the notion of virtual volunteering and peer-to-peer mentoring came up. A big opportunity, I think, for us as an industry, and just reaching out and connecting. And I think sometimes it's getting comfortable with not having all the answers, but just being able to put yourself out there and make yourself available to your constituents, right? And to assure them that we'll get through it together if we stay connected and we communicate. So Paul, thank you for being patient. A lot of questions coming up, and I'll tee this up to you because I think you're uniquely suited to answer, because you as a leader and through MPI's really incredible commitment to education and community, a lot of folks are asking, how do we stay current with what skills that we'll need, and how do we use this as an opportunity potentially to upskill and to look for new ways in which we can enhance our own professional and personal experiences that make us best poised to come out of this a stronger individual and a contributor. So any thoughts about how MPI is helping to solve that for our industry?
Yeah, first, I've just been captured by this dialogue. Thank you to my colleagues. Really informative, great content being shared, great information being shared. So I'm taking a lot out of it. Really appreciate that. I'd say MPI is probably very much in line with many of the other associations right now. We're focusing on three kind of big areas. The first is providing resources to our community, and that gets to your question around professional development. We are focused on advocating for our particular industry, the live events industry, and you see other associations doing that, lobbying and advocating on behalf of theirs. And then, frankly, from the business side, we're focusing on keeping MPI alive for the next generation. There's a unique business crisis going on that we're challenged in managing the business while also delivering on the value and expectations of what our members have been part of our association for many years. So it's that interesting balance that we're going through. From a professional development perspective, I look at it from really two aspects. One is just the practical. People have a lot of time on their hands right now. Mm-hmm. They want to know how to respond to the crisis, but they also very proactively are looking at how do I reimagine and remake myself for perhaps a new career or a new environment in which the current career I have may be acting as we come out of this crisis. So that's a role many associations are playing right now. It's the educations, that adult education, professional development, and guiding people, providing resources, and giving them the tools to remake themselves while also helping them respond to that economic crisis and figure out how they can best position their organizations to come through this crisis. I think the other side of the association role and that education is more of a mental one. We as societies crave and thirst for human interaction. We thrive off human interaction, and innovation and creativity comes out of human interaction. When we're under stress, we need it even more so, and we've cut it off. We've cut it off for the practical reason we've got to stamp out the virus. So associations are stepping in and creating at least a social interaction. An environment like this, or other means for people to get together and at least begin to express their concerns, express their needs, and try to manage some of that mental challenge that everyone's going through right now as they deal with stress. I was on a call yesterday, a panel, and I heard one of the best analogies out of this. Brad Dean from Visit Puerto Rico, he said, we've actually been blessed. We've been blessed as an industry. For those of you who are familiar with the classic Christmas story, It's a Wonderful Life, we've been given a George Bailey moment, a moment that not many other people can have. The world is figuring out what it's like to live without hospitality, without social interaction, and without live events. And they realize we need it. So all the messaging we're getting about a slow recovery, but a recovery, or a different kind of industry are all true. But I think what's also very true is the world has recognized the need for that interaction, the need for live events, the power of live events, and we're all going to come out of this well. In the meantime, associations have to be there to help get that message out and help develop and educate those individuals who are going to deliver those live events.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, because it is about the education. It's also about, the network. And I think all of us as leaders, I think, been in this industry probably 30 plus years. We might not want to admit that in front of everybody today, but I think, we've developed friendships and connections, those people we lean on and we look to learn from and to inspire us when we have low moments. So, and I think the associations are where we've gone to develop those connections. And I think for the younger generation that's experiencing probably the worst crisis we've ever felt as a global economy, new to our industry, I hope they see and find the benefit of that, those connections and that solidarity, because I think it is important for us in terms of our wellness. It's important in terms of our growth and development. So I agree. We're coming up on, the last 15 minutes of our time together, and I had planned to talk about or have each of you share your final thoughts around one really important topic. And I think, we touched on it a little bit throughout the time together today, is what are the opportunities for adaptation? Transformation is a big word, but I think as an industry, we've been talking about some really heavy, important topics for quite a bit of time now, whether, we refer to that as sustainability or to our commitment to social responsibility. I think we all are committed to a value system that would prioritize those things, right? And we're very much committed to diversity and inclusion and creating welcoming environments. So I guess I would ask each of you to maybe share your thoughts about, how do we use this as an opportunity to think about events as a catalyst to maybe regeneration of the communities that we serve, whether it's a city or it's a community of people. I think that's the element that's going to inspire and capture the hearts and minds of the people that can advocate on our behalf outside of our industry. So maybe you can just comment a little bit about like I said, the opportunity for us to take a step back to then move forward in a way that is truly meaningful and can carry us forward in a way that allows us to really grow and have a lasting legacy impact. And I think I'll start, and I'm not going to pick on any one person first, but maybe I'll start with Scott, and then we'll go on to the next panelist.
Look, we've been running a study for a decade on the importance of face-to-face meetings, and in 10 years, that number has never dropped below 62%, with 11% being teleconference or video conference. 10-year study. That is a long time with a lot of data. And I can assure you that I can't wait to see the results at the end of this year with our research team, because that number is going to go up, not down. Because if anybody has to do one more Zoom meeting, one more Skype meeting, people are fed up. They want to get out. They want to collaborate. And so what we're hoping for is that science fixes this problem. They discover a vaccine, be no different than getting a flu shot, and they fix the therapeutic, so if you do get sick, you get better as you would if by taking a simple antibiotic. That's where the bet has to be made in the corporate world. because we can't go on like this for a long period of time. It's affecting everybody psychologically. It's bad for people's business. It's bad for their health. And everybody wants to get back to being humans. As Paul said, we are human beings and we want to interact. I have a tremendous amount of hope that by the end of the year, we are going to have solutions to this problem, and that this is not going to be anything other than a temporary situation, and that a year from today, we'll be together at some meeting saying, do you remember that crazy Zoom podcast that we all did together talking about what happened to us? Because you couldn't make it up if you wanted to in a movie. Yeah. I have faith that live events are coming back. This is temporary, and we all have to stay on course to be contributors to all the things that have to happen to ensure that there's an industry to come back to that's ready to go when the time comes. And for me, that's the goals that we have at GBTA, other than my dog making noise, who I can't control.
Yeah, my dog is actually at my door now too. I'm trying to ignore him. So Adam, any thoughts on that? How we build on this and come out of the storm?
Yeah, I share Scott's optimism. I think the recovery is inevitable. The value proposition of what events and travel represent is unshakable. And, a few months ago, one of the issues that we were regularly addressing with our clients was concern about over-tourism. I think the George Bailey moment is going to reset that. I think people now know what it's like without travel and equally without events, and they do not like it. And so here we are. We've got the opportunity now to reset in terms of people's feelings toward travel and towards meetings. But I think that the unique opportunity, as I see it, is to position travel as to be a key catalyst of the economic recovery. Because as Scott said, things are going to open up. But one of I think the enduring headwinds will be an economy that is still repairing itself from this shutdown. And so to the extent that we can position meetings as a driver of that recovery, Amy, you said it's $1.5 trillion in GDP. It would be the 13th largest economy in the world, meetings alone. And it does represent, just by virtue of the functions that it serves, the opportunity to improve productivity and business activity and investment, and therefore employment and tax revenue. Meetings they truly are a catalyst of economic activity. So I think that's the opportunity for innovation, in a sense of how do we position the meetings industry as not something simply that we want to recover for its own sake, but something that in its recovery is going to help to drive the broader economic recovery that's going to be much needed as we move into next year.
Well said. Sebastian, closing thoughts?
Yes, of course. I think that we need to pivot, actually. So it's not a question right now out of necessity. Some meetings are going online, but I think the industry needs to pivot and include more and redefine the word meeting and events. Today, it is not obvious when you say you're an event company that you can do online meetings, and an online meetings requires to be designed. It is highly under-strategized online meetings. They're probably all bad, we could say. Meeting professionals will include the organization of online events. I think online events can augment, probably replace some bad live events. So it's really, we're going to live together on and offline. It goes together, and both have a need and both can build on each other. So I invite, our industry to, I would say, and that's what we'll do with our company, to really continue to imagine ourselves as being relevant, not reimagine. I'm really saying imagine ourselves, continue to imagine ourselves and build ourselves, not rebuild, with both sides, the online and the offline. It goes together. It's not one or the other. It's useful together at the same time. And we need to own this. This is our opportunity, not let another sector own this. This is ours.
Yeah, this gives us a moment to ask some generous questions, right? About what people value and what they're looking for in terms of outcomes and impacts. Yes. Paul, yes. Any?
From a business perspective, I don't want to repeat what's been said. Everyone has been very insightful. I agree with everything. I'd like to put a little bit of a personal note out there, which is take advantage of this opportunity. be introspective, look at this pause as an opportunity. I've never spent so much time at home in my 30-year career. I've never had dinner with my family every night for 30 straight days. I'm reading things. I'm doing things like puzzles I've never done since I was a child. So take advantage of this moment. Amongst this crisis, there are some positives that will come out of it. And one of those can be your own development and maybe a new grounding in your own life. So stay well, take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and I can't wait to see all of you very soon in the future.
That's lovely. We're doing some puzzles in our house too. Fortunately, I can't see most of the pieces. Karina?
Hi. Yeah, as Paul said, everybody's been very insightful. Totally agree with everything that has been said. I do think, just to build on what Scott and Adam said, that, being one of the first industries to be hit when events were cancelled, if you look at Mobile World Congress, massive trade show in Barcelona, as soon as it was cancelled, the impact on the city of Barcelona was felt instantaneously. So if there was ever a moment in time when consumers, day-to-day Joe Blogs in the street understands the value of a live event and the value of people coming to a city for trade shows and for events. It is right at this moment. So that impact has been felt right across the globe. So I do think that presents us with an opportunity to advocate with consumers, with the general public, with corporations and with politicians on the value of the industry. And there was something I read in the paper last weekend, which I think encapsulated actually the MPI slogan of when we meet, we change the world. And it was that a team of engineers from Mercedes Formula One based in the UK, together with a team of doctors in the UK and with some scientists from the UK government, were able to develop a new CPAP machine. A CPAP is a continuous positive airway pressure machine. And they managed to develop a new one in 100 hours and get it approved for production within 1 week. And it's a process that usually takes a few years. And those machines have are already in production, and they're already in hospitals in the UK and saving people's lives. And the engineer that was in charge said, I was very clear that we had to be working face to face. So he had to get special permission for these teams to collaborate face to face in this time. And he said it because it just wouldn't work beyond on WhatsApp groups and working remotely. It relied on us being together and working as one. And at the end of the day, that's why companies are going to come back to meeting face to face, because it's simply more effective, more productive, and more innovative when people are in a room together. And so as they say, when we meet, we change the world. So that would be my final comment.
Thank you, all of you. Fantastic job today. I really am so grateful for you being present and taking this time to spend with our community and offer your personal reflections and your thoughts of inspiration, because that's really what today is all about. I think it's a good moment. We've all collectively had a lot of time to reflect on the power of our industry, and that this is a time for all of us to be asking ourselves some generous questions, in terms of how we can better contribute and tell our story. So I want to thank all the participants today for spending time with us. I'm so grateful for all that you do and that which you bring to our industry. And I'm very much looking forward to a time when we're all together again. I know it will be fantastic. It will be a great moment of joy. And in the interim, let's stay together, let's stay connected, and continue to have some really meaningful conversations about what this means long-term for all of us. But be well. I wish you peace. I wish you health. And I look forward to being with all of you again soon. We'll be following up with some answers to your questions, because we ran out of time today, and they're texting me madly to let you know our program will continue on. Paul and I are jumping off to be on another call, as I'm sure our other panelists are as well. But again, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything.
Well done, Amy. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.